Superhero Pantheon. My name is Jerome Cuson. Once again this week, we will be continuing our examination of Spider-Man. We are on the 5th and final season of the show. We'll be discussing the first 3 episodes. You can follow me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Hero Pantheon on Twitter. And please leave a 4 or 5 star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of your favorite podcast apps. Hell, Brian, I will tell you this. I very recently left a 5-star review on this podcast. So I did it myself, so you should as well on Spotify. And again, wherever you listen to this podcast. And make sure you do that. My co-host, of course, is Brian at Brian DeVrain on Twitter. This week, we are going to be discussing The Wedding. We are also going to be discussing Peter Parker going to Russia and dealing with the fact that his parents may or may not have been Russian spies. So that's definitely a thing. And that's pretty much where we are going to leave things off. But Brian, I have to tell you that coming into this season, knowing kind of what's coming, I don't know every detail, but I kind of know what's coming. My expectations are very low. And given what happened in the final season of the X-Men series from the mid-90s, expectations also very, very low. I mean, the fairy tale X-Men episode may be one of the worst episodes of television I've ever seen. And as long as we clear that bar, then I'm not going to be too mad. But Brian, I will say these first 3 episodes, I was very whelmed by them. That's the best way I could describe it. Very whelmed.
This is what I call the syndication portion of like the 65 episode run, because to get into syndication for an animated series around this point, 65 episodes, that's why X-Men, Spider-Man, Chippendales, DuckTales, all those shows ran 65 episodes or 68 or something just to get that syndication number. And right now we're in that mode where they're just stretching things out to get to that 65. And it's unfortunate, but here we are, because they are really, really, really stretching things out and just looking for filler. Like, the first episode is The Wedding, and we know, like, that should be a really, really important thing in the life of Peter Parker. But with the stakes and what you know what's coming later on, spoiler, I'm not going to fully spoil it, but it really, like, the stakes lower of this episode once you find out what happens to Mary Jane later on in, like, 4 episodes from now. So it's just kind of like, what was the whole point of this episode with the wedding and everything? So I get it. Consequences or whatever, but they wanted to give you this feel-good episode of a wedding with Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and it's everything kind of what you expect, but it just kind of reminded me of the Cheers episode with Woody getting married. Of course, that's kind of one of those, like, you know, top-level sitcom marriage episodes with the wedding and all the slapstick going on. Excuse me. But this did remind me also, strangely enough, of the January 6th insurrection, because despite all the shit that goes down and them trying to get married, and then we're trying to get a new president, and the shit that goes down in between. At the end of the day, we're like, fuck it, we're not going to choose another day. We're all here still. We're still going to go through with this.
Well, I certainly didn't think we'd ever make connections to the January 6th coup, but here we are. That's certainly a thing that happened. Speaking of January 6th, Brian, where do you think Scorpion was on January the 6th?
Somehow still in his costume and not getting out of it ever again?
As soon as I saw Scorpion robbing that bank, I was like, come on. I do not like that character. And it is borderline a running gag at this point, just having to watch him on this show. So yes, he begins. He can't do anything right though, Brian. He tries to capture Aunt May, tries to steal the wedding rings. He fails to do so. So yes, but we do get to see a little bit of Spider-Man here at the beginning. Meanwhile, Harry Osborn is in therapy. We get a brief cameo from Dr. Kafka. He is going over his nightmares and is seeing Peter as Spider-Man. And then Mary Jane makes a very, very poor decision, Brian. This is I would not have made this decision personally, but apparently Harry is in a mental health facility. And this is when Mary decides that she is going to tell him that she is marrying Peter Parker. I don't know. I would have rethought that strategy personally.
Okay, the other thing I noticed too is that the facility allows you to touch the hands of the patient, which I think is a total no-no. Like a total, like, safety issue. But that's another thing, but whatever, 90s. but it was just so like I don't know if it was fucked up, but B, her intentions were, I wanted you to hear it from me and not from someone else, and I get that, and that's kind of I get that, but at the time he was just in not the right mental state, and it just felt like she had to tell him before it was too late because I think the wedding was the next day, so just all these little things. Yeah, man, I would say it was a bad decision. Like, if you probably should have Peter Parker there with you. Maybe that would have been a trigger. I don't know. Then maybe that would have been worse. But hey, at least we got to see Ravencroft, so that was kind of cool. I don't think we'd seen Ravencroft since the Venom episode. So, and then of course Dr. Kafka coming back. I feel like she's gaslighting him, but maybe not. Maybe she thinks that certain things are happening in his head, but they're not really happening that way, because in reality, like I mentioned before, how I love that movie Interstellar, the Green Goblin is like somewhere in the fourth, fifth dimension communicating with Harry. So, and I'm not just making that up, because there is a scene where you see the Green Goblin communicating from this like portal dimension, and you can clearly tell that Harry's listening to him. So I thought that was really interesting that they're sticking with that, and you kind of have to pick up on that to see what's really going on, because Harry is not crazy. He's really talking to his dad. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, because obviously Dr. Coffin thinks he's not actually talking to his dad. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on there, I thought, mentally, and psychiatry, like the psychiatrist kind of stuff. But because the episode is so short, they couldn't really explore that. Like, I would have dug like another 5 minutes of just Harry in the institution, scary a little bit, you know what I mean? Maybe too much for kids, but I mean, still, like, if you're gonna go with that, have some fun with it, and have like, a little bit of like that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of feel.
I can definitely see that. I would agree with you that because this is a kids show, there's only so many places you could go with this. I will say I am very mixed on this episode, but my favorite running gag is the fact that Peter goes to see the Kingpin. Kingpin arranges the details of the wedding, because Peter did save his life in the season 4 finale. And Jameson then gets mad at being scooped and offers to loan Peter a wedding instead, but it is a loan that Peter's apparently going to have to pay him back over 10 or 20 years. This is a tremendous running gag. The fact that Kingpin and Jameson are competing to pay for this wedding. And I almost wish that we could have gotten even more specific with it. And Brian, I have to be honest, this is one of those things where I was like, can you imagine if this was Vincent D'Onofrio and J.K. Simmons in these roles offering to pay for the wedding? My body would not have been able to handle how funny this would have been.
Yeah, I think we're getting to that point, because it feels like, I don't know, Vincent D'Onofrio, the way that they're kind of in the MCU right now, they're kind of shaping that MCU character. I think they're going to build him up as this evil boss, but then by the end of it, he might get some humanity back. Because, I mean, the way they're building, like the way they book him here, write him here, I should say. I mean, you're getting a lot of sympathy for Kingpin here, like the way he's willing to go out and help Peter Parker and all these things. But it's just like, there's kind of like bad intentions behind it. But the intention for him is just kind of get publicity. And he doesn't know Peter Parker is Spider-Man, which I think is still ridiculous. But I mean, still, like, him helping him out, and I get it. But he was just willing to have fun. It would seem like Kingpin, the character, was having fun booking the wedding. So I don't know. I think they were trying to give him some humanity back, because overall, in the end of the series, like, he's not the overall main villain. Like, he kind of becomes like a side villain compared to the overall scope of the universe. So I don't know. It was very weird, because you were just getting the sympathy off of him, and then, of course, with with Jameson, like, again, like, we've always had that mixed feelings about him. We've seen him. We've empathized with him with his son whenever his son is in trouble, but then he's acting like an asshole and having a really, like, being on the board, questionably being on the board. So conflict of interest kind of thing going on. So Jameson always has like a questionable, like a question mark above him all the time. What are his intentions? And in this case, it just seems like the natural competition within him, because he just wants to compete, because he knows. Oh, the other thing too is that Kingpin got his own newspaper. So that adds, more fuel to the fire, because they want to cover the wedding in their newspaper, but no, we're covering it in our newspaper. So that kind of thing. And then I thought it was pretty fun, man. That's kind of one of the redeeming qualities of this episode, because that did have me laughing. But again, like, it wasn't like, all over the episode where they were just planting jokes here and there. It got a little too serious by the end. But again, they just wanted to have this one single episode of the wedding.
They did, and Kingpin ultimately does align with Peter, which is a pretty funny moment. We also get Black Cat returning out of nowhere. Where did Felicia already come from? Like, he just pieced out from Blade and Morbius, and that it was just, it felt like, why is she here? Why would she want to attend this wedding? How long was she in Europe for? Like, it's never clear what the timing is on this. So Felicia Hardy just randomly showing up, like, it really felt like the last time we saw her, like, that was her farewell. So it was profoundly bizarre to me that she was around.
It's like one of those random She-Hulk cameos, right? Just have a random cameo for the sake of having a cameo. I don't know, but it was kind of weird. But it did feel like, I don't know, like it seemed like she seems a little more mature. But maybe that's because, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 episodes since we've seen her. But again, it just felt kind of like, different. And I was like, where's Morbius then? Like, did she come with Michael Morbius? And I guess she didn't. Obviously, she came alone. But it was kind of nice to see. It wasn't like, she didn't steal the show or anything. So it was fine. She just had a little background cameo.
So in the end, the wedding does happen. Jameson gives Peter a van, which is pretty funny. And Green Goblin is still bitter over what happened. So that is the end of episode 1. Then we go into the first of multiple mini-series over the course of the rest of the season. The first one is 6 Forgotten Warriors. The first chapter is entitled 6 Forgotten Warriors. So basically the concept of this episode is that we begin with Fury having to go bring a commander out of retirement and announcing that they have to stop May Parker, Big Mystery. To Russia we go, and no, we are not seeing Colossus, but we are seeing Silver Sable's first appearance as she helps in the kidnapping of Dr. Groitzig, I believe is how you pronounce it. We get Robbie making a mysterious phone call all the way back in New York. And Aunt May is thinking about selling the house and moving in with Aunt Anna. Peter sees the paper. Aunt May is very flustered and agitated. And we get Kingpin deciding to once again reassemble the Insidious Six, this time with Vulture replacing Mysterio. So kind of a weird, like, it takes a while for this episode to really understand what's going on. And for this being a kid's show, I was thinking to myself, like, what would somebody who is not of our age be thinking about this? Because this is not very interesting, honestly. This is not very interesting.
As a kid, the first thing we would respond to was, oh, Spider-Man's on a flying ship. And then, everything after that is just dialogue. This is one of the weaker episodes, so like of the series for me. Like, it just feels like it was written for the wrong audience, right? And then because they're trying to do this espionage, spy type dialogue and type story, like, it's not really a story that's designed for kids. It's more designed for like adults. That's one problem. The other problem is it's rushed in this 22-minute format, which is another big problem because now you're rushing all these characters and there's so many things going on, and you're introducing like, Silver Sable and all these other characters too on top of these doctors and all these other random doctors, and then you have to throw in the fact that Peter's parents might be Russian spies. It's just a lot going on, way too much going on. I don't know what they were thinking, man, because like it just feels like we got to tie in these characters. Let's try to tie in Peter's parents. Let's tie in some espionage. And then it just kind of gets so confusing to the point where it's like, who's on whose side? Is that doctor like, is that the chameleon? Did that guy turn into the chameleon? And then it just gets really confusing. And the whole idea is like the six coming together again. It's like for a prison break, but the prison break is in Russia. Or no, excuse me. It's on the Shield helicarrier. And then they have to go to Russia. But still, like, it was just like, we're going on the helicarrier, we're going to Russia, we're going back to Russia, and then the next episode gets even more confusing because they get knocked out and wake up at some random lab. So there's a lot going on, and it's unfortunate that they didn't really, like, sit down and be like, okay, what's going on here with this plot? Because clearly there was way too much going on. Way too much for a kid, way too much for me, and I'm just trying to, like, just sit there and just kind of enjoy it, but then it's just like, okay, I got to keep track of all this stuff now. And then all of a sudden, boom, the Insidious Six are back.
Yeah, we do get the Insidious Six, unfortunately. I mean, it's one of those things, it's like they've proven themselves to be losers at this point. And Vulture is certainly not going to help because he himself is also kind of a loser. So they are only 5 because they need to go break Chameleon out of the Shield headquarters. We got somebody named Mr. Marlowe going to visit Peter and May. Peter is immediately suspicious, as he should be, especially Marlowe has a mustache, and I feel like that immediately makes him suspicious. And Peter finds some passports. Spider-Man fetches a ride on Marlowe's ship to Shield headquarters. Good job by Mr. Marlowe, who is apparently associated with spying, not noticing that Spider-Man is on his goddamn ship.
Not only that, did you notice how fast he got that taxi? And then I was like, damn, he got a fast taxi. And then you realize, oh shit, that's a Shield taxi, and it turned into a flying ship. So just those little, New York things that they kind of forget about sometimes. But they'll make fun of New York, but then they'll have these little moments where like they get a cab in like 2 seconds.
So I mentioned the Insidious Six being losers, and I think this encapsulates the fact that they are losers. So we get the Insidious Six. They get the upper hand on Spider-Man, and then Fury chases them away with a blaster. I laughed so hard at this because it was ridiculous. They overcome Spider-Man, but Fury takes out a blaster and just starts shooting. Doesn't actually hit any of them, but that chases them away.
And what I was laughing about was the Rhino appearance when he entered through like a wall or something, and Spider-Man standing on top of a computer, and of course he just rams the computer. You know what I mean? Like doesn't stop. He doesn't aim. He just fucking rams and goes right into the computer, and of course causes an explosion. And that's like every single Rhino appearance seems like that. So I guess it's on par, I guess. But I was just laughing because I was like, this is so Rhino right now. Like this is to come in and just destroy shit without randomly and just causing so much problems.
He is the Brooklyn Brawler of the Insidious Six, I would say.
Probably, and I would say the Scorpion is like Red Rooster.
Yeah, I mean maybe a little bit higher on the jobber pantheon, so to speak, but
maybe.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on here. And then we get Aunt May revealing information about Peter's parents and the possibilities they may be spies for Russia. So the thing about this is they haven't planted any seeds. They talk a little bit about Ben. They have never discussed Peter's parents at all. Like literally 4 seasons, nothing ever mentioned. Now Peter's parents are like the focus of this episode and the next episode, and it's just really strange to me that we haven't dropped any hints, we haven't addressed this at all, and now all of a sudden they may be Russian spies. It's very unusual to me that they would do something like this, because look, I don't think Peter's parents really matter all that much, except for the fact that they're dead and they obviously have an influence on what happens to Peter, but like in the end, it doesn't really matter. Like how they died is almost immaterial to me in terms of the character. And I know that Amazing Spider-Man tried to address this, and boy, how did they do a poor job there. But the episode incredibly gets even more absurd because Peter immediately wants to go to Russia and find out what's happening. Mary Jane is perfectly fine with him going to Russia, even though they are newlyweds at this point. And if that doesn't get you, Brian, Peter tells Jameson that Spider-Man is going to Russia, and Jameson suggests that Spider-Man could be trying to become the Russian leader. This is fucking insane, Brian. This episode almost destroyed me because of how absurd it was.
I couldn't stop laughing at Jameson, man. Because the whole, because Peter Parker's trying to convince Jameson to pay for him to go to Russia, and he's telling him, what if Spider-Man becomes a dictator over there? He can take over the whole Russian nation. I was laughing my ass off because it's playing into his paranoia. But if you want to tie it into 2022, there's a lot of that paranoia that goes on the internet that people buy into. And that's why we're in the state we're in right now in this country. And I'm just thinking God, this seems so stupid that he would buy into it. But knowing people today, maybe it's not so stupid for Jameson, because in his perspective, in his mind, Spider-Man is such the enemy that he's just willing to buy into any bullshit. You know what I mean? Like blaming Biden for $8 gas when gas is really $4.50 right now. So you know what I mean? It's just stupid shit like that, and altering what actual facts are. But that's just human beings, I guess, and people having grudges against certain people, and I get it. And Jameson really hates Spider-Man, and he's just trying to prove that he's a fucking asshole. But I get it. And it was just so ridiculous, man. But I was just like, okay, Spider-Man's going to Russia, and I really don't care about his parents, but I guess he really wants to find out if they were Russian spies or not. And like, why did Aunt May like not tell him all this time? You know what I mean? Like, come on, Aunt May. Like, that's something you have to tell, your grandkid or your nephew at such a young age to deal. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just hide that. So that was kind of fucked up. And on top of all that, like, just I don't know, just him going to Russia and Robbie going to Russia as well. And I'm thinking this whole time, like, this is like a company expense. They're gonna write this off with taxes. Like, what is going on here?
Doesn't he need like a visa? I am sure they're getting into Russia
Passport,
even in
yeah,
1984.
I know. I don't know. So they just go to Russia. The flight looked, I don't know, commercial. Uh,
The animation of Russia was also very poor because it did not look like Russia at all.
yeah, it just kind of looked like generic buildings, and they just kind of added snow. But again,
I mean, the one thing I will say is the X-Men episodes that take place in Russia, they generally look more like Russia than.
that's what I was gonna say. Like, I clearly remember the Colossus one,
Yeah.
and it looks so much better. But I don't know if they just didn't have the money because we're at the end of the rope, and this is like the last season.
Probably a budgetary problem.
There's a lot, like, there's probably a lot of stuff going on, and there's just like, shit, we got to get all these characters in, maybe because like they made all these toys that are coming out. There's always probably something like that. So, and it's unfortunate because they just cram so much shit in there, and it's like, I feel bad too. Like, I don't care about Peter's parents, and I know that's weird to say, but it's like it doesn't affect the story, and it never did. So sometimes, like, you don't need that backstory. Like, his parents just maybe just died playing Jumanji or something like that. I don't know.
It's incredibly random. We end with a bomb, which it literally looks like the most generic, like dynamite, a stick of dynamite that you could possibly imagine. And like the only way it could have been any worse if it was like one of those like bombs that you would see in like Spy versus Spy. Like it actually would have been a fitting end of this episode if that's what the bomb looked like.
Oh my goodness. And then, yeah, and then again, that's kind of leads into the next episode, right? Because then Peter wakes up, right? Like, that's kind of the transition.
Yeah, so
It was to be
the
continued.
episode 3, which is called Unclaimed Legacy, which anytime I read that, the portion of my brain that can't read, I see it as Unchained Melody, and it just makes me think of that scene from Ghost. And yeah, that's
Hey,
where
man,
my mind
Ghost
went.
is an incredible movie. One day, hopefully, we can review it, but I'm not the only one that thinks that because Ghost is a really incredible movie. I've said it.
Patrick Swayze is pretty underrated. Roadhouse, Dirty Dancing, Ghost.
Tong Wong
pretty,
Fu, where he did the cross dressing, was still amazing.
maybe not that one. I mean, I haven't watched that one in a while, but
Hey, that was the first time I saw cross dressing in a movie, and I was like, okay, I get it.
Anyway, back to this episode. Spider-Man wakes up, and Robbie is able to disable the bomb. They depart before the police show up, and the police look exactly the same. And I like how they reference the fact that they may spend an evening in a Russian prison. I'll say this: if you are committing criminal activity in Russia, I don't think you're spending just a night in a Russian prison.
Yes, tell that to a certain basketball player and a certain cop from a certain town that didn't get out a year later.
Yeah, for sure. So Chameleon plays the husband of somebody, and basically what happens is he gets information that would ultimately clear Peter's parents. Peter's parents are not Russian spies, but they were in fact double agents. We get more interactions with the members of the Insidious Six. Again, the animation, not great. Kingpin reveals information about a doomsday device, not the Road Warriors, Brian. Just want to point that out. And wanting it now, but they have to go after your favorite. I believe Red Skull is kind of your favorite character in Marvel. Is that true?
I mean, only because I called it an Infinity War, but I mean, ever since like the first Captain America movie, he's been on my high list of like, maybe it's because of Hugo Weaving, and I really appreciate Hugo Weaving and everything he does because he elevates the role so much. But yeah, I love me some Red Skull, even though this is not Red Skull they reveal, which I was like, oh man. But then it becomes this joke where it's a mask on a mask, and if you want to explain that one, because that was hilarious.
Oh my God, we're gonna get to that in a minute. Spider-Man.
Let me mention one more thing. I think what they were going for in terms of the design of one of the Russian characters that the chameleon was supposed to impersonate, I'm like 50 to 75% sure they were going for that Peter Lorre look. And if you don't know who Peter Lorre is, he's like an actor from like the black and white era. He's famous for being like characterized on the Looney Tunes as like, you know what I mean? Like if you look at his face on the Looney Tunes cartoon, like, oh my God, I know what that face is. And that's Peter Lorre. I feel like they kind of went with that in terms of some of the character designs and terms of these Russians. But that's just me because I was thinking the whole time, like, God, that looks like Peter Lorre. But again, that's probably, maybe, possibly an Easter egg because, again, that's such an old school reference that the people making this show were old school cats. So there you go.
So we get Kingpin revealing this information. We get Gas knocking them out. So it is alleged that one of the six is a traitor. One of the Insidious Six is a traitor to Kingpin, and Sable will not reveal which one it is. I believe we do not know who it is at the end of this episode, right?
Does it really matter? I mean, come on. I mean, what really matters is Kingpin finally used his strength and broke out of whatever metal thing that they were kept. I've been waiting for that since he didn't do that the first time when he was in that metal thing in like season 2, and finally just and I was like, thank you, use your fucking strength for once.
All right, so when he does the unmasking, I immediately thought of Scooby-Doo, and I was literally waiting for Kragoff to just be like, and I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for these meddling kids and their dumb spider. That's really what I was waiting for at this point in time, because it visually it kind of looked like Scooby-Doo just with the way that he unmasked him, and it was really, really funny to me that this is happening. And yeah, this season in general just feels much more like a cartoon than prior seasons. It feels like there is much less of the horror influence, and we're in kind of weird territory with this show now.
Yeah, I mean, once you got Kingpin being like a questionable hero in multiple consecutive episodes, things are starting to turn a little bit. So that's just kind of my perspective, because I've started to notice like Kingpin is much more sympathetic now, and like you're more on his side, especially with the wedding stuff. Even here, even though it's his plot to kidnap the chameleon again and get the Doomsday device or whatever, it seems like he's trying to get the Doomsday device away from Red Skull. Is that my understanding? Because he thinks Red Skull's going to do something completely worse with it. By the way, it's not Red Skull, it's Red Skull's son, I should say, but he still takes on the moniker, which I still think is kind of cool. But it does seem like Kingpin is trying to not, ignite the Doomsday device.
Yeah, I mean, he may use it to hold the world hostage or some shit like that. But incredibly, this episode gets even crazier because, as it turns out, Brian, we are in Chernobyl. We're in Chernobyl. You would die in 1998. You would be dead. I believe still in 2022. If you went to Chernobyl right now, you would get radiation poisoning and you would die quickly. That's just what happens because of the incident that took place in 1986. And I have to tell you, Brian, when they revealed that this is Chernobyl, again, I almost died of laughter.
I was in shock because I was like, I don't think they understand like the physics and scientific, math of it all, because if they point out where the nuclear reactor exploded, right? Like they show it. And if you kind of do the math, they're like probably, I don't know, like a 10-minute to 20-minute walk away, which is equivalent to almost a mile. So a mile radius from the blast site or the nuclear reaction site. Yeah, that's you're within the territory. You know what I mean? I think it's like I think it's like a couple miles, right? Something like that. I don't want to speak out of turn, like scientifically, but that exposure, they were in there, like they are so close to it. Like I know they try to animate it to seem like they were far away, but they still would have been burning. You know what I mean? Like they would have been burning. So, oh my goodness, tremendous stuff, man. Because I was just laughing my ass off, and I was thinking like they didn't really think this through, but at the same time, that's quite the reveal. Like if you had a movie or a show, and at the end they reveal they're in Chernobyl.
I mean, if you're a kid and you're a parent, you're watching this with your kid, and Chernobyl is mentioned, like how do you explain that? I mean, the HBO miniseries wasn't around yet, and it's ridiculous. Jameson is unhappy that Peter did not get any pictures of Spider-Man, and I gotta be honest, like, yes, Jameson is a lunatic. But Peter Parker 100% did not play his cards right. He had so many opportunities to get pictures of Spider-Man in action in Russia, and he just didn't do it. And I don't understand. Like, he had so many chances. Like, it's inexplicable to me. And like, of course, the payoff is, of course, that Peter has exposed the fact that his parents are not traitors. So, a bit of a happy ending. But man, Peter, you done yourself in. You got nobody to blame but yourself.
Yeah, but I don't know if he was thinking like, if I do bring pictures, does that mean Jameson's thinking that Spider-Man is taking over Russia or some shit like that? Just weird stuff, man. But it sort of is a happy ending, even though again we really don't need to know the origin of Peter's parents and like making them spies and stuff like that. I would rather just have them be normal people, man. Why can't they just be normal? You know what I mean? Like that seems to be just like a regular origin story for me. Like the fact that they're spies and stuff, it just makes it seem like Peter was destined to be this like hero or whatever. But I just prefer the Peter Parker story where he's just some kid, you know what I mean, from Brooklyn or Queens or whatever, and then becomes Spider-Man. So I don't like this idea of him being destined by his parents. So, but that's just me, and I get that they wanted to tie in his parents. So if I were writing a Spider-Man movie, I would just not, just say his parents are dead. That's all you need to know.
So next week we will be completing the Six Forgotten Warriors arc, and we'll get into some more trouble with this series as we'll see how cartoonish and wild it gets. I know that there's a couple more plot twists coming, but yeah, this obviously this is a kid show. It's been animated, but it just feels like this is becoming more of a cartoon than the show that I really enjoyed in the first 4 seasons.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate, man, because we were so hyped up, but then it's just burnout, and I get it. So again, 65 episodes is a lot to produce. So once you start telling all your stories and you told all the stories you want, you end up like where the Flash is right now. We're to the point where it's like they have no more villains, and I'm not even watching it anymore. So what does that tell you? You know what I mean? Stretched too thin, unfortunately. But some shows don't go through that. Like I feel like DuckTales like still had some juice left even after the 65. Even the 65 they did in 2017, I felt they still had some juice left. So it just depends how you tell your stories, man. Don't burn all your good characters out in the first 3 seasons, knowing you have like 2 more seasons in the contract or something like that. But that's just me thinking long term. But you never know. You know what I mean? You just never know.
Well, you're also trying to balance the episodic nature versus telling a story that's going to be very serialized. So I think that is also part of the issue. But we'll probably get into this more as we continue to explore this final season. So next week, that is what we are going to be doing. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we will talk to you next week.
So, since Kingpin knows the Queen, does that mean Kingpin is going to be at the upcoming funeral for the Queen?